all that matters is we get collective intelligence in human civilization that takes us to the next level of consciousness where we can survive.
Welcome to Facing Future. I'm delighted today to welcome Richard Wilkinson, the author of The Impact of Inequality, How to Make Sick Societies Healthier, and The Spirit Level, Why Greater Equality Makes Societies Stronger. And welcome back to John D. Liu, who's inspired people all over the world to get together to restore nature through the Global Earth Repair Foundation and Eco Camps movement, which he founded in 2016. He's also the ecosystem ambassador for the Common Land Foundation. And today we also have with us Marteen Klop, founder of the Grounded Community. So welcome to you all. Global and local economies, which are wildly out of balance, in which a few billionaires control 3/4 of the world's wealth, sucking the resources, and fostering the destructive dream of ever-increasing affluence, while millions of people live in desperate poverty. Inequality creates weak societies and little stewardship of the natural world. Can we create better communities that restore the balance of both ecology and our societies? What do you all think?
Well, my work has shown that whether societies have bigger or smaller income differences between rich and poor has a very strong effect on community. Community life withers with great inequality. People take less part in local community life. They're less likely to know their neighbors. You find all sorts of things that really show the breakdown of community. You get more violence. People don't trust each other. It's been shown repeatedly. I think that knocks on to forms of environmental damage.
Well, I think personally, what I've seen is that as an individual, and I think as communities, we need to have purpose. So what is happening, it seems to me, in the society is that we've gone into total materialism and transactional economics, and that there's actually very little value in it. I've been all around the world, and what I see is that people are building ruins. You know, this is not going to last. And so the next generation of archaeologists are going to be finding like, oh, look, they have a toxic layer, they have a trash strata. You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. And so and I think in the past we had cosmologies, and now many of the wonderful cosmologies from indigenous people, which chose to consider that the life and the earth was sacred, they've been dominated by sort of brutalistic domination through colonization and genocide and slavery. So all of these quite horrible things have taken place, and there's very little trust, and there's a lot of trauma and psychological dysfunction. And what I've been studying ecologically is function and dysfunction. And what I see in human civilization is, well, there are some functional people, and the majority of people are good. But what's happening now is this return of kind of archaic violence, the war that we're seeing. And we see the war because it's white people, but those wars have been happening throughout my lifetime in all over the world. And but we need to recognize that everybody on the earth is the same. Everybody needs purpose, and we're hardwired to procreate, not hardwired to commit suicide. And that we have to learn the lessons of history, or we're destined to repeat them. And we have an opportunity, but it's the window's closing.
Well, the restoration of nature is a very exciting part of our possible avoidance of extinction, shall we say. This is where really the hope of the world lies, is in restoring nature. And the fact that people are coming together all around the world to do this it leads possibly to new communities, which would arise around those now localized life support systems.
This is something I can really only agree with, and we see it happening. And great to be able to learn from you today, Richard, and John as well. I personally believe that we need people from all walks of life to make ecosystems thrive. And we also see more and more urgency with young people to be able to grasp something tangible to work on the positive solution. So I had the same experience with studying, oh no, the world, it's not going well, but what can I do? Where can I start? And I just had one opportunity to work with a local farmer, and he showed me that everything I was worrying about on a global scale, he was fixing locally. And that really got me enticed to work on the food system, to really get active locally. And what we have done to excite many other people to join is we organized a series of events, festivals showing it's possible and it's fun to work on the solutions. From there, many young people, even in cities, in knowledge institutions, all education levels, say, wow, what can I do? How can I help? Where can I start? And having this one physical moment where they plant a tree, they harvest a vegetable, they create something, doing something physical, something so strikingly real, really opens up their minds, and it keeps them engaged as well. And from there, we create the space and the support for people to co-create new projects, new initiatives and events that inspires others again. And like that, we've grown a community of more than 300 diverse members, from which we also connect them to useful work at regional partners. And everyone's so happy that it's tangible and it's positive, it's constructive. And I think it's beautiful that places like ecosystem restoration camps, places like Grounded offer that opportunity, the way out and the way in.
Mm.
I think that, and John mentioned, I think you didn't use the word consumerism, but you said something in that sort of direction. While I think it's extremely important to do things at the local level, and personally, I grow some of my own vegetables and have a heat pump and so on. I think it's also important that we understand the trends in our societies that we all observe and complain about. One of which is the importance of money and consumerism and so on. And it's very easy to demonstrate that those patterns really come out of great inequality. Great inequality makes money more important because in a way it says who's important and who isn't. Richer people seem to be cleverer and so on than poorer people. And you find that people who live in more unequal areas spend more of their money on status goods, things that make them look good in front of other people. And I quite agree with what John was saying about purpose. But the trouble is with huge inequality, and where the value of somebody seems to be almost a reflection of their income, that sense of purpose goes into getting rich. You know, life turns into something that's entirely about becoming important, moving up socially. That's what life is all about. And it's extraordinarily damaging. And although, as I say, we have to act locally, I think governments also have to take into account the very destructive effects of these trends in inequality. And they relate very intimately to environmental problems. Not only, as I said, do people consume more and more status goods and so on, get more consumerist, money becomes more important in more unequal societies, but you get an unwillingness to accept environmental policies from governments. if you believe, I mean, it's very clear that the rich create much more than their share of all our environmental problems. The richest 10% create something like 40 or 50% of the CO2 emissions. And what it means is that you get issues coming up as in France, when Macron, the French president, wanted to raise the taxes on fuel, on petrol and so on. He was met by this very long sustained movement all over France, the Gilets jaunes, people opposing that, saying it wasn't fair. And why should the poor pay for the damage that the rich have done? And I do think we have to relate to these problems and take them on board. We can't just ignore them and hope that we can get on with our gardening and make everything nice.
Well, I think that's so true, and that's a counter narrative to the advertising and the political propaganda and the inundation of kind of meaningless, trivial stuff that we're bombarded with. Noam Chomsky calls it manufacturing consent, and I think he's exactly right, but it certainly hasn't made him happy. How does this become collective intelligence for everyone on Earth now? Because if we continue with this ridiculous hierarchy, and we can look back historically and say, well, this comes from domination. So if you take a big rock or a big club and you go in and you beat up everybody and you say, we're in charge, then essentially you're saying, I stole it and it's mine, is some sort of legal rationale for this kind of behavior. It's ridiculous. That can't be justified. So what we really need to do, and what we're seeing now in the camps movement is, all right, people are rejecting this. And we can see that the society as it exists is in extreme risk from collapse. The currencies are, and the economy, you can't infinitely grow based on finite resources. It's an impossibility. So once we just look at these different things, and then when we realize, there were 2 Nobel Prizes, John Nash and Elinor Ostrom, both pretty much saying that if you pursue individual interest to the point it erodes the collective interest, it's not in your personal interest anymore. So once we just understand that, then that particular fact takes us to another possibility. So what do we do in this? And we're creating communities. So we're creating the ecosystem restoration camps and communities. And these communities are about having egalitarian communities working. We were just discussing in the meeting that we came from to here about community currency, which could be used within a circle of trust of everybody who's doing this. And is it possible to have an exchange rate between local currencies and fiat currencies, for instance? So if we all work for our local currency and we're compensated for what we do in our local currency, can we have an exchange rate that allows us to say, if we want to buy a new computer or an automobile or something like that, that we can do that with fiat currency? And I think it's possible now. But what we're seeing is maybe we don't want to own automobiles. Maybe we want to have a fleet of automobiles that serves everybody. So if you need a truck or a van or a 2-seater to go on your wedding anniversary out to dinner or something, that you have everything that you possibly need. And maybe you can have horses and bicycles and boats and even aircraft. It's possible. So we're now at the point where some of the camps, we were just talking with the camp in Kentucky, which is the mountaintop removal, the ecological impacts are extreme, because they blew the tops off mountains and then they just kind of pushed the rubble around and put some soil on top and said, well, it's okay now, and left. But essentially the rivers are disrupted, the forests are disrupted, the people are in dire poverty without much education or hope. And so now we have a 7,000 acre camp in Kentucky. And so can we create new communities where the relationships between everyone in the community is clear? Can we build central kitchens and creator spaces and cultural stages so that we have everything necessary for the society? So we're not looking to the television or to metaverse or something for entertainment. We're having music every night and theater and well, movies, but let's drop the ones about zombies and vampires and war. So could we do this? And the whole intention of the community is to restore the ecology. So the value creation for this community is outrageously large. And so instead of saying like we're buying and selling plastic junk that comes in container ships from China or something, let's just restore the rivers and then say, well, what's the value of that? It's clearly vastly more than a bunch of plastic junk. So then we have everybody engaged in this and we creating a collective intelligence around it.
It's fantastic to have this in a community. Spreading it to the rest of societies that are unenlightened is another matter. How do we get the message out that buying things is really not the goal of life, or that our worship of celebrity and royalty is not serving us? That somehow we're all in this kind of Stockholm syndrome where we've fallen in love with our captors, or the royalty, the celebrities, the rich people. Oh my goodness, it's just amazing, and not really recognize the value of a human being as such. We're always looking for, oh, how's he doing? It means how much money has he made? And that's kind of the value in the common society.
The day that I met John was actually a wonderful talk, because what he's talking about was community kitchens, creator spaces, cultural stages, and have these communities everywhere. And I was like, whoa, that's actually what we're kind of doing. So that was a big confirmation for me. We're onto something. And why? So that's the base infrastructure. It creates these beautiful places where everyone is welcome, a safe place where all human potential can be integrated and have to develop the opportunity to develop themselves. And these places either make life more fun with more delicious food and music and great people around you and useful work during the day and a nice drink afterwards, or these kind of places offer also the starting point from which we can build an alternative society and more fair systems. And I do love that we're talking about equality today, because I think equality is the root cause of all ecological harm. And it is also the root and the important thing to have in order for a community to function. And that's also what I note with our 300+ member community. We operate kind of like a swarm. So everyone can fly in, can fly out, but based on being transparent. And one important principle in the swarm is that everybody flies more or less the same distance from each other. So everybody is equal. Everybody being equal is an important ingredient. Having shared values has been an incredible, important ingredient. Transparency, and then with that, we've been able to create a lot of self-governance, and it's growing and pollinating by itself. But this equality is a very important thing to have established. And I'm curious, Richard, because we're talking about these things, and you said right now everybody builds up status through basically earning more money or being richer. Would you believe that people could build up status by creating more value or being happier? Because whenever people talk about their salary or talk about smart cities, I challenge them. I'm like, well, what about happy cities? What do you think about that? So do you see developments along that line?
Well, I think our social environment decides very much what we give priority to, what seems to be important. And I think a lot of us feel we're made to feel almost worthless. And bigger income differences increase that belief that some people are worth more than others. And we can show, again, very simply through research, that that also increases the tendency to feel that you're judged, your worries about how you're seen and judged by others. And basically, we show that there are two responses in more unequal countries where people are feeling more worried about how they're judged. You can either do what I've sometimes called going under. You accept that you're made to feel worthless, low self-esteem, lack of confidence. You withdraw from social life, feeling that social meetings are just too stressful. You find excuses for avoiding going out and meeting other people. Or you do the opposite. You start to flaunt your abilities and achievements and exaggerate them. You go in for a sort of self-enhancement, a self-aggrandizement. And you can see both these patterns in more unequal societies. And I find myself listening to you and, of course, liking what you've both been saying, but wondering where these feelings that I'm describing are so strong, particularly in the inner cities and so on, how what you're saying relates to people living in cities of 10 or 20 million people. They seem to me the real problem.
Well, if I look at that, so essentially for the camps and communities movement that we've been building, it's only 6 years old, really. And what I was dreaming, so I had worked in large-scale ecosystem restoration and in research into ecological systems. And so I was working mainly with the World Bank or the Global Environment Facility or the UNDP or somebody like that. And countries like Norway or Sweden or Germany or Netherlands, Britain. And so, and China. And then the bizarre thing was, I just started seeing that, well, this is way too slow. And it is giving the power essentially to bureaucrats or to intellectuals who are basically doing a kind of conceptual exercise. And I've been to 90 countries. I've studied all these cultures working in restoration. And the only thing that makes it happen is people. You know, it's not machines. You'd have to have people who, you know, and anyway, if the people are consumers now and basically wage slaves or indentured servants in this giant consumer economy, then if they transition to doing restoration, not only have they reduced their kind of dependence on transactional economics and consumption, but they've put their energy and their intelligence and their actions into restoration of natural ecological systems, which are the basis of life on Earth. So the value creation by this group. And so I noticed that this is not the group that's in charge. This is the group that actually does the work, you know. So are we going to have a you know, like a post-colonial situation where the billionaires and the people in marble halls are describing the policies, and the scientists are joining them and saying, this is what you do, and then they're going out to these people who have to do the work, and they're saying, here's what you do this, you do that, but they actually never do it. And the people who become very good at it, they're like the master craftsmen, the botanists, so soil creators, they understand biodiversity, they're creating sanctuaries, so
Yeah.
how
many people, how do they live? How do they sustain themselves?
well, they're all different. So you'll have to, like Sekhin in Egypt has had 45 years of development. So it has a university and a clinic, and it has every educational, special needs education and vocational training, elementary, secondary, tertiary, everything.
And
So
do people live communally, or do they live in nuclear families in separate housing?
Yeah, they live in separate housing generally, but sometimes in sort of apartment flats or dormitories. And there's the camps are sometimes you have people in tents, and sometimes you have people in tiny houses or in earthen buildings. There's kind of a movement to do earth building now, and especially in, say, Morocco or Kentucky or Somalia, there's not going to be any resistance to creating earthen buildings. So it's not, the laws don't just favor the real estate developers.
And
So
is each family doing its own agriculture, or do they join in working on one big farm, or what?
all of the camps are self-organizing, self-governing, and autonomous. So they determine what they're going to do, but they're all aligned in the idea that we have to restore all the degraded lands on the earth, but we can't obviously just say, I'm going to restore all the degraded lands on the earth. We have to work in locally. So we have to work locally, but simultaneously, this has to happen all over the world. And I think that what we see with the growth of the movement, that it comes so quickly to exponential growth, is that it's accepted in all cultures. It's not culturally specific. And so when you strip away the domination or the inequality aspect, and you say, well, okay, we're all equal, let's work together, we have to do this, then the vast majority of people can understand that and get behind it. It's just, how do you survive in the transactional economic system? So we're designing new community currencies. We're talking about how central kitchens, where we have direct between the producers of food and the central kitchens, the food just comes in, and all the food comes in. All the food is fresh and it's all organic, and there's no chemicals. It's all, and so everybody's getting uplifted.
Richard's point about cities being, where the majority of people live, and these kind of utopias, there's, how do we bring people into these kind of sanctuaries? And the migrations that are going to occur because of climate change are going to create more people wandering the world, wondering where to go and what to do. And these sanctuaries really could function as a way of employing those people, restoring the nature, people who already know how to do things. I mean, it's a really exciting possibility, and probably the only one that's going to save societies. I don't know what will happen with the cities. That is a whole other question.
I find myself wondering about land, because when I think of trying to set something up like this in Britain, land values are so high, and I'm well off by most people's standards, and yet I can't go and buy a chunk of, our garden is tiny. It's about 12 meters by 5 meters. And I'd love to have more garden and to grow more. I use it pretty intensively, but it's a real obstacle to what you're talking about, isn't it?
I think we should build you a tiny house in Spain. We've just been offered a communal area of 1,600 hectares.
Yeah,
because they have no people. And so if we can build places, we put in a creator space, so we have all the tools, and everybody says it's a little bit like the Amish, like, oh, you're getting married, you need a house. Everybody shows up, they build the house in a week, and then that young couple begins their life together without mortgages, without that kind of financial debt, but they have a huge debt of gratitude and connection to their community. So the next young couple that gets married, they're going to be there building that house for them. And so, we have now the the situation where we're defining and we're just like trying to understand what is possible. So we know that this is wrong over here. So I don't think that's going to work. So what is possible for us to do? So what we're seeing now, for instance, with these wars and with the grain situation, where the grain production and grain shipments coming from Ukraine and Russia are disrupted, millions, potentially hundreds of millions of people. I was having conversations at the COPs with the World Food Program and others. They're terrified by the potentialities of mass famine. So if we're looking at this, first of all, if you look at the wars, you go, what are you doing? This is World War I, World War II. It's Og, from, a caveman whacking something. It's so not modern, not moral, not wise. So why is that happening? But what is the result to all these people in Somalia, for instance? Yeah. So now we have a camp in Somalia together with a Sufi intentional community. So this is one of the camps that we think has great potential to create a prototype for addressing famine. So putting in a central kitchen, growing food as fast as possible, bringing it to the central kitchen, feeding fresh food, and processing and fermenting and whatever, dehydrating, whatever you have to do to save. And so there's no waste, zero waste. All the food is kept in a central storage. And the idea is like nobody starves in our community. Everybody eats. If there's food, we share it. And so if there's less food, we have less. And if, but anyway, then there's full employment, there's food, there's satisfaction in knowing that you're taking care of your family and your children and your community. And you're thinking about the generations to come, because you're like thinking like, what is the purpose of my life? Well, I think it's going to be to help the people who are coming after me.
Yeah, just to get back to your question of people in cities, access to land, that it's very difficult. And with our community, we're also just students, entrepreneurs, so no one has the means to buy land. And I was really puzzling with this. So we're currently inner city. We have an old military fortress where we organize different events around food, education, and art. And it attracts a lot of people, a little garden, a little exposition space. And we've been really excited to see how can we from there get access to a piece of land where we can restore land and establish social justice, make a bigger garden, a greenhouse. And I was really puzzling with how can we get the means to buy that land? Do I need to crowdfund or lend, or what kind of smart construction? And then John told me a story from when he was in college. He said, I just asked. I said, I'm a young man who wants to take care of a piece of land. Who has something? So I also just started asking every time I'm anywhere, somebody hands me a microphone, I say, well, we are a diversely skilled community looking to restore land and establish social justice. Who has something? And I was completely astounded. The first meeting already, somebody offered 1,600 hectares in the south of Spain. Said it's a communal estate, it's desertifying, it needs love and attention. And people, I was like, okay, wow, we're people looking for land, but apparently there's land looking for people.
It's only when people have the moment of realization, well, that's true, then they'll do it. So how do they get that? They get it by doing it. Once they see it happen in front of their face, that they brought back a stream, the spring comes out of the side of the mountain again, the trees go up in closed canopy and it's cooler and moist. And once they understand this, they're now breathing the phenols, which are coming from healthy plants. That's going to give them health. And that's going to give them a new perspective. That's what we need.
Well, the human paradigm has shifted before. There have been sudden changes in the way people understood the world. It's certainly not impossible that in this time, with all this pressure from the changing climate and the recognition of, as you say, the poisoning of our world, more and more people are aware that they need some kind of change. So you know, it's in a terrifying time, but as Greta Thunberg said, it's the best time to be alive because it's the most crucial time in human history. And here we are talking about and trying to create a possible path forward for humanity, which not everyone is seeing at this point. So thanks everybody for participating in this conversation. And
Thank you for doing it.
Thanks a lot.
okay, thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.